7-year-old Emma Caldwell took her first bite of the vanilla cupcake and smiled at her grandmother. 30 seconds later, she was convulsing on the church lawn, foam pouring from her mouth as her family screamed for help. Across the same lawn, retired firefighter Bill Henderson collapsed mid-sentence while praising the frosting. His wife Janet fell beside him, clutching her throat, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Within 8 minutes, 35 people were dying. The emergency dispatcher received 14 simultaneous 911 calls. The small-town hospital was overwhelmed as ambulances raced through streets that had never seen such chaos. And standing in the middle of it all, watching the carnage unfold with an expression witnesses later described as eerily calm, was Margaret Rowe, the beloved baker, the church volunteer, the woman whose cupcakes had just become weapons of mass murder. This is the story of how one woman's hatred poisoned an entire community. Literally. To understand how Sunday, August 18, 2019 became the darkest day in Millbrook's history, you have to understand who Margaret Rowe was before she became a killer. For 12 years, Maggie was the heartbeat of St. Matthew's Lutheran Church. Every bake sale, every potluck, every community gathering, her pastel cupcakes were there. Pink vanilla, baby blue lemon, mint green with cream cheese frosting, each one perfectly piped, lovingly crafted, and devoured within hours. She was like everybody's favorite aunt, remembers longtime congregation member Dorothy Fenwick, the kind of woman who'd show up at your door with a dozen cupcakes if you were going through a rough patch. Maggie lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom house on Elm Street, the same house she'd shared with her husband Robert until his sudden death from a heart attack in 2016. After Robert passed, the church became her entire world. She volunteered for every committee, organized every fundraiser, baked for every occasion. But here's what nobody saw coming. Behind that warm smile and those perfect cupcakes, Margaret Rowe was drowning. After Robert's death, Maggie discovered their marriage was built on lies, hidden debts, secret affairs, a life insurance policy that had lapsed years earlier. She lost the house, her savings, and her faith in the man she'd loved for 28 years. The same community that had celebrated her cupcakes whispered about her financial troubles. Church leadership positions she'd applied for went to younger women. The woman who had fed everyone was slowly being forgotten by everyone. But why would a trusted baker cross the line from hurt feelings to calculated murder? The transformation didn't happen overnight. According to her sister Linda Hartwell, Maggie's bitterness grew slowly, like poison seeping through cracks. After Robert died, she changed, Linda recalls. She'd always been sensitive, but she became suspicious. She started keeping track of who thanked her for the cupcakes and who didn't, who invited her to their homes and who just expected her to keep baking. In early 2019, Maggie applied to become head of the church's charity committee, a position she felt she'd earned through years of service. The role went to 32-year-old Ashley Brennan, a newcomer who'd only been attending St. Matthew's for 8 months. "That's when I saw the light go out of her eyes," says former friend Patricia Mills. She smiled and congratulated Ashley, but something died in her that day. What the congregation didn't know was that Maggie had started planning something unspeakable. In the months leading up to the bake sale, she'd been researching poisons online. Library records show she checked out books on chemistry and toxicology. Her Amazon purchase history revealed orders for chemicals that had no business in any kitchen. She'd chosen cyanide, a poison that works fast and leaves little time for help to arrive. But the most chilling part? She spent weeks perfecting her cupcakes, making sure they'd taste so good that people would eat them quickly before anyone could detect the bitter almond smell that might give her away. The woman who had spent years bringing joy through baking was now weaponizing that same skill. But which cupcakes would she poison, and how would she make sure only certain people ate them? Before we continue with this devastating story, I need to ask you something. Cases like Margaret Rowe's remind us how quickly someone we trust can become someone we should fear. These stories matter because they show us the warning signs we might miss in our own communities. If this story is gripping you the way it's gripping me, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't let YouTube's algorithm hide stories like this from you. Your subscription helps us bring light to the darkest corners of human nature. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happened next. August 18, 2019 was supposed to be St. Matthew's biggest fundraiser of the year. The annual summer bake sale drew families from 3 neighboring towns. Local businesses donated prizes. Children ran through the church grounds, while parents browsed tables loaded with homemade treats. Maggie arrived early that morning with 4 dozen cupcakes, her largest contribution ever. But unlike her usual colorful display, she'd organized them differently. 35 cupcakes sat in special pink boxes she'd never used before. The remaining 13 were in her regular white containers. Security footage from the church's parking lot shows something chilling: Maggie walking back to her car 3 separate times, retrieving items from her trunk. Witnesses assumed she was bringing in more supplies. We now know she was retrieving pre-measured doses of cyanide, carefully hidden in small packets. At 11:47 a.m., exactly 13 minutes before the bake sale officially opened, Maggie was seen in the church kitchen, alone, working at a table with her back to the door. Kitchen volunteer Beth Kruger tried to enter to help set up, but Maggie quickly blocked her. She was very protective of her space that day, Beth remembers. She said she was doing some final touches and needed privacy. I thought it was sweet. She was always such a perfectionist with her baking. Those final touches were doses of poison being carefully injected into 35 cupcakes. But here's the detail that still haunts investigators. Maggie didn't poison her cupcakes randomly. She had a list. In her purse, police later found a handwritten note with 35 names. Church members who had wronged her over the years, people who hadn't appreciated her contributions, families who had gossiped about her financial struggles. And at the top of the list, written in red ink, Ashley Brennan and her perfect little family. How does someone decide which of their neighbors deserve to die? And how did Maggie plan to make sure only specific people ate the poisoned treats? At noon, the bake sale officially opened. Maggie stationed herself directly behind her table, something she'd never done before. Usually, she'd wander around, chatting with families, enjoying the community atmosphere. But on August 18th, she became a gatekeeper. Every time someone approached her table, Maggie would personally select which cupcake they received. She'd chat, smile, and carefully hand them either a safe cupcake from her white containers or a deadly one from the pink boxes. Ashley Brennan arrived with her 2 young children at 12:23 p.m. Security footage shows Maggie's face light up with what witnesses described as genuine warmth for the first time that day. "Mrs. Rowe was so sweet to us," Ashley later testified. "She insisted on giving my kids the special cupcakes from her pink boxes. She said they were a new recipe she'd been perfecting just for the bake sale." Ashley's 4-year-old son, Tyler, and 6-year-old daughter, Madison, each took a pink box cupcake. Ashley selected a vanilla one for herself. Within 20 minutes, all 3 were fighting for their lives. The Caldwell family, grandmother Joan, parents Michael and Lisa, and 7-year-old Emma, approached Maggie's table at 12:31. Joan Caldwell had been one of the church members who'd questioned some of Maggie's financial decisions during a committee meeting 6 months earlier. She remembered exactly who had said what, Joan's son Michael later recalled. She looked my mother in the eye and handed her what she called the prettiest cupcake on the table. Then she gave Emma one too, saying it was special just for sweet little girls. But the most calculated moment came when Bill and Janet Henderson approached the table. Bill had been the committee chairman who'd ultimately chosen Ashley Brennan over Maggie for the charity position. Janet had been vocal about her concerns over Maggie's emotional stability following Robert's death. Maggie personally selected 2 blue frosted cupcakes for them, engaging them in conversation about how she'd put extra love into that particular batch. What kind of person can look children in the eye while handing them poison? And how long did Maggie think she could watch this horror unfold before someone realized what was happening? The first victim fell at 12:47 p.m. 7-year-old Emma Caldwell had been playing on the church playground when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence and grabbed her throat. Her mother Lisa ran to her as Emma began convulsing, her small body racked with spasms as foam poured from her mouth. Within 2 minutes, 4 more people collapsed in different areas of the church grounds, then 6 more, then 10. The scene descended into chaos as families screamed for help, children cried, and the small-town emergency system was overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. "I've been a paramedic for 15 years, says first responder Jake Morrison. "I've never seen anything like it. Bodies everywhere, all with the same symptoms. The smell of bitter almonds in the air. We knew immediately we were dealing with cyanide poisoning." As ambulances raced to the scene, something extraordinary happened. Several quick-thinking parents and church members began comparing notes. Every victim had eaten a cupcake. Not just any cupcake, specifically cupcakes from Margaret Rowe's table. At 1:03 p.m., 16 minutes after the first collapse, church deacon Paul Hendricks confronted Maggie directly. She was still standing behind her table, watching the chaos, with an expression witnesses described as detached fascination. "I asked her point blank if there was something wrong with her cupcakes," Paul later testified. "She looked me dead in the eye and said, 'Some people finally got what they deserved.'" Those words confirmed what everyone was beginning to suspect. But by then, 35 people had consumed the poisoned treats. The youngest victim was 4-year-old Tyler Brennan. The oldest was 73-year-old Joan Caldwell. Between them were parents, grandparents, church leaders, and community volunteers. All united by one thing: they had somehow, in Margaret Rowe's twisted mind, wronged her. But how does a community process the fact that someone they trusted had tried to murder their families? And what was Maggie thinking as she watched her neighbors dying around her? I need to pause here because this story gets even more disturbing. If you're watching this and thinking about how easily this could happen in your own community, you're not alone. That's exactly why stories like Margaret Rowe's matter. They force us to look deeper, to question our assumptions about the people we trust. Hit that like button if this story is affecting you the way it's affecting me. Share it with someone who needs to understand that evil can hide behind the most innocent face, and subscribe. Because the deeper we dig into cases like this, the better equipped we are to spot the warning signs. Trust me, what happened next will change how you think about trust forever. Of the 35 people who consumed Margaret's poisoned cupcakes, 11 died that day. 14 more were hospitalized in critical condition. The remaining 10 survived, but suffered permanent health complications. The youngest fatality was Tyler Brennan, the 4-year-old whose mother had received the promotion Maggie wanted. He died in his father's arms in the ambulance, never understanding why his special cupcake had made him so sick. Joan Caldwell, the 73-year-old grandmother who had questioned Maggie's financial decisions, passed away 3 hours after eating her cupcake. Her granddaughter Emma survived, but suffered severe organ damage that will affect her for the rest of her life. Ashley Brennan, the woman at the top of Maggie's hit list, survived, but she lost both of her children that day. Her 6-year-old daughter Madison died at the hospital. Her son Tyler died in the ambulance. Ashley herself suffered permanent brain damage from cyanide poisoning. As the full scope of the tragedy became clear, one question haunted everyone. How had they missed the warning signs? Margaret Rowe was arrested at the scene, still standing behind her cupcake table. When police handcuffed her, she reportedly asked, "Are you sure you got everyone who needed to learn their lesson?" During the investigation, authorities discovered the extent of Maggie's planning. Her computer contained months of research into poison dosages. Her basement had a makeshift laboratory where she tested different methods of masking cyanide's bitter taste. Most disturbing of all, they found detailed notes about each of her intended victims, their schedules, their families, their vulnerabilities. But perhaps the most chilling discovery was a journal entry dated 1 week before the bake sale. "They think I'm just the cupcake lady. They think I'm harmless. Tomorrow they'll learn that the person who feeds you has the power to destroy you." The trial of Margaret Rowe lasted 6 weeks. She showed no remorse, even when confronted with photographs of her young victims. When asked why she had targeted children, her response chilled the courtroom. Their parents needed to learn what it felt like to lose everything. She was convicted on 11 counts of first-degree murder and 24 counts of attempted murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But can a community ever truly heal from such a betrayal? And what lessons can we learn from Millbrook's darkest day? 5 years later, Millbrook, Tennessee is a different place. St. Matthew's Lutheran Church still stands, but the annual bake sale ended forever on August 18, 2019. The church kitchen was completely renovated, but many members say they still can't bring themselves to eat homemade treats from community events. The trust is gone, says survivor Michael Caldwell, who lost his mother and nearly lost his daughter. Every church potluck, every school fundraiser, you look at the food and wonder, who made this? Why are they being so nice? What do they really want? The psychological impact extends far beyond the immediate victims. Children who witnessed the tragedy suffer from PTSD. Parents struggle with anxiety about community events. The simple act of sharing food, something that had bound this community together for generations, became a source of fear. Ashley Brennan, who lost both her children and her health, moved away from Millbrook 6 months after the tragedy. In her only public statement, she said, "I can't drive past that church without seeing my babies dying on the lawn. I can't look at a cupcake without remembering the last words Tyler said to me, 'Mommy, this tastes funny.'" But perhaps the most haunting legacy of Margaret Rowe's crimes is how they changed the way Millbrook residents view their neighbors. The woman who had baked for their celebrations comforted them in their grief, and served alongside them for over a decade had been planning their deaths. Dr. Sarah Chen, a criminal psychologist who studied the case, explains, "Margaret Rowe represents our worst fears about the people we trust. She weaponized the most fundamental human connection, the sharing of food, and used it to commit mass murder. The psychological trauma extends far beyond the physical victims because she destroyed the community's ability to trust." Margaret Rowe remains in Tennessee's maximum security prison for women. She has never expressed remorse for her crimes. In fact, prison officials report that she frequently asks visitors if they've heard how the ungrateful people in Millbrook are doing. When asked by a prison psychologist if she understood the magnitude of her actions, Maggie replied, "I fed that community for 12 years. I gave them my time, my energy, my love. When I needed them, they abandoned me. I simply returned the favor." The case of Margaret Rowe forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. How well do we really know our neighbors? How easily can kindness mask hatred? And what happens when someone decides that their pain justifies destroying innocent lives? In Millbrook, they learned that the person who brings you comfort food might be the same person planning your destruction. The woman who volunteers at every church event might be keeping a list of people she wants to hurt. The neighbor who always has a warm smile might be harboring cold, calculated rage. Margaret Rowe didn't snap in a moment of passion. She planned, researched, and executed a mass poisoning with the same methodical care she'd once put into her cupcakes. She looked children in the eye and handed them death disguised as a treat. She watched families collapse and felt satisfied rather than horrified. The 11 people who died that day, including 2 children under the age of 7, became victims not of random violence, but of one woman's decision that her hurt feelings justified mass murder. Their names deserve to be remembered. Tyler Brennan, age 4. Madison Brennan, age 6. Joan Caldwell, 73. Robert Mills, 45. Patricia Foster, 52. William Henderson, 67. Janet Henderson, 64. Dorothy Chen, 38. Michael Torres, 41. Linda Vasquez, 59. James Morrison, 62. 11 lives lost because Margaret Rowe decided that being overlooked was worse than being a killer. So I'll leave you with this question. How well do you really know the people in your community? And what would it take for someone you trust to decide you deserve to die? The next time someone offers you a homemade treat at a church bake sale or community event, you might find yourself wondering, just for a moment, about the hands that made it. That's Margaret Rowe's lasting legacy. She didn't just poison cupcakes, she poisoned trust itself. Stories like Margaret Rowe's are exactly why this channel exists. We dig into the cases that expose the darkest parts of human nature because understanding evil is the first step in protecting ourselves from it. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think differently about trust, community, and the people around you, then please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that monsters don't always look like monsters. And let me know in the comments, Have you ever had a gut feeling about someone that everyone else dismissed? Your story might help someone else recognize warning signs they're missing. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous person in your community is the one everyone trusts the most.